Good morning and welcome to the Point and Happy New Year. It's 2018. For many of us, it means just another new year. But for two people in the state of Michigan, it means they will try to lead their respective parties to victory in Decision 2018. State Party Chairman for the Republicans and Democrats on tap this morning, starting with Democrat Brandon Dillon. Generically, going into this election cycle, what do you and Democrats in the state of Michigan need to do to capitalize on some of the resist movement, the enthusiasm that you talked about as we were talking here before, that has really kind of coalesced around the Democratic Party since last year's election?
Well, yeah, as we were walking up, Rick, last year at this time, it was a much different feeling, I think, for Democrats. We were still scraping the dust off of the loss in 2016. But really, since then, as you said, there's been this huge surge in activism. And what we've done at the party to prepare for 2018 is we didn't wait until the election year. We got started early, putting organizers back on the ground, engaging volunteers. We've actually knocked on or phone called over 150,000 people this year alone, just trying to find out what issues are important to them, organized town hall events, worked with allied organizations, other nonpartisan groups like Indivisibles, which have cropped up all over the state. People just concerned about the direction of the country and the state. And we've seen some pretty good signs for 2018. We had a special election in Michigan and the Upper Peninsula that we won by a very healthy margin, even though Republicans put significant resources into that, and won local elections with progressive Democratic-leaning candidates in 2017. So if the winds continue to go the way they are, we think we're set up for the potential of a very good year. But it's going to take the same kind of commitment we saw from those folks who got engaged in 2017 to really ramp it up in 2018 and help Democrats from the governor's office all the way down to school board who are going to be on the ballot next year.
One of the things that we don't know are the things that we don't know. We were talking about this just before we started. We don't know what the issue is going to be. The issue of the day is going to be on Election Day of 2018. But what we do know are some historical facts, and that is that in the state of Michigan, in the relative near past, every time the governor's office comes up for a vote, it's every other party. It's a Republican, a Democrat, a Republican, a Democrat. So there's a Republican in now. Historically, that bodes well for you. The second year, the midterm election for a first-term president usually bodes well for the party that's not in the White House. So again, that would play into your hand. All of those things historically would seem to be in favor of Democrats. And then you add on this enthusiasm. What did you say about your February convention you had?
We had 5,000 people there,
which is
over double what we've ever had at any other convention. And this was for a convention that wasn't even contested. Fortunately, I didn't have an opponent that time. But we have an endorsement convention coming up in April to choose our Secretary of State, AG, and Supreme Court candidates, or at least put our stamp of approval on them. And we're expecting the same kind of turnout. There's people organizing all over the state, and they're not waiting for permission from the state party or the local parties. People have gone out and taken the initiative. And what we've tried to do is, we know we can't predict every single issue that's going to come up next year. We don't know who all the candidates are going to be, but we can provide a foundation for people to be able to go out and talk about the issues they're passionate about, and then direct that activism into electing a Democrat for whatever office they choose to support in 2018.
You used the word progressive leaning a moment ago. What does the Democratic Party look like compared to a year ago? Because a year ago, after the general election, obviously there was some looking in the rearview mirror. But even before that, with the Bernie Sanders win in the primary, the more progressive leaning part of the party, is that where the Democratic Party is going in Michigan, do you think?
Well, I think that there's a couple things that are going on. I think the party is a progressive Democratic Party, and that's really where most of the voters are. When you look at issues like access to health care, a fair tax system, making sure that we're protecting the environment, the party is there. What we've seen with a surge of new folks that have come in is not that they're trying to push the party to the left, in my estimation. It's just asking us to be bolder and stand up stronger for the principles that we always have, and not be shy about talking to people about why it's important that people have access to affordable health care, why they have clean water, why they can have a tax system that doesn't give all the benefits to the top 1%, but invests in the kind of things that people care about, whether it's Medicare, education, or a clean and healthy environment. So I think it's been a very positive development with those folks who are coming in, and they're just looking for the party to be stronger and bolder and not shy away from the fights that we need to have with people who are really trying to redefine what it is to be a citizen and redefine what it means to be successful in the state of Michigan.
When you look at the state of Michigan and look what's happened over the past 7 years with Governor Snyder, that's during his term. I'm not assigning all of this to him, but
Sure.
You've seen a big change economically, as we have across the country. You have unemployment rates that are historically low and matching national averages. A considerable change from the time when you were in the legislature, and you know the difficulties that the state was going through then. How much does the old James Carville adage go, "It's the economy, stupid," play into an election cycle like 2018?
Yeah, certainly it plays a big role, but I think people's perceptions of the economy and who it's benefiting are even more germane to this conversation. If you look at the stock market, Donald Trump talks about the stock market and how it's booming. It's been booming for quite a while, but average people aren't feeling that. Nearly over half of the people in this country don't have a retirement account. So they're not looking at the numbers on Wall Street. They're looking at their paycheck. They're looking at the bills they have to pay. They're looking at the increasing cost of health care and scared that that may go up even further if the ACA is repealed. So there are certain metrics that we've historically looked at for the economy, but I think the deeper one, and one that Donald Trump, frankly, was able to tap into in 2016, even though the economy had improved greatly under President Obama, was people's anxieties about the economy not working for them and working for a very small group of people at the top. The Betsy DeVosses of the world are doing great. The Koch brothers are doing great. People who have disposable income are doing fine, but it's the people who work hard every day that still feel the pinch of an economy that's not working for them. I think that's what this election will be a referendum on: who can best articulate how you can make the economy and the system work for them and not be so unequal in terms of the benefits that it accrues.
You have a certain advantage because you're not running for election, but if you were, how do you do that? I mean, how do you convince the folks out there who are going to work every day, who haven't seen an increase, not a real increase
Sure.
in their income, certainly not to keep up with the number of years that they had no increases.
Right.
A lot of folks here in the state of Michigan went years and years and years with no increase or decrease in pay. How do you then articulate that in such a way that it can be real to people?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, there is a big distrust of people running for elected office, that they don't do what they say, or they'll say things just to get elected and then backtrack on their promises. I think the biggest one we've seen right now is Donald Trump, and whether it's his cozying up to China before he said on the campaign trail he labeled him a currency manipulator, whether it's a tax plan, whether it passes or not. He said on the campaign trail that he thought wealthy people should pay more, that hedge fund managers should pay more, and the middle class could get a sizable tax cut. Well, that hasn't happened. He said health care would be great for everybody, and then he tried to dismantle the ACA. So I think Democrats have to come up with a clear and consistent message that we're going to fight for a tax system that actually does give the middle class a tax break and ask corporations and everybody to pay their fair share, a healthcare system that actually covers as many people as we possibly can, but doesn't do it on the backs of higher premiums for working families.
When you look at the field of candidates that are out there, for example, running for governor, and I've already had I can't even I forget the number now, 4 or more Democrats who are running for governor. You obviously, that kind of goes back to this enthusiasm that you're talking about, people that are trying to get involved. Although in years past, there has been kind of, I won't say there's been a push, but you have benefited perhaps from the idea that you haven't had primaries in some years past for some of these offices. So that kind of keeps the costs down and keeps the animosity down. This year, no such. It's going to be It's going to be an all-out race.
Yeah, and I tell people, we should welcome that. We should embrace it. I think oftentimes when people at the top try to decide who the candidate's going to be and clear the field, it really it lessens enthusiasm. People feel like they didn't have a stake in choosing who the nominee is going to be. And I asked people the last time we won the governor's office, it wasn't a clear primary. We had a very aggressive three-way primary with Jennifer Granholm, Jim Blanchard, and David Bonnier, and we won that race. So I think as long as the primary is done in a way where we're actually talking about issues and who can best answer the question that we talked about a few minutes ago about how we can make sure the economy works for everybody and restore a basic sense of decency and fairness to the system, we'll be in great shape. I think on the Republican side, you're going to see a much more brutal primary this year with Brian Calley and Bill Schuette really fighting for the heart and soul of what the Republican Party is, and we welcome that. debate as well. I think it's actually better for voters to have a primary where people can go out and make their case directly to them as opposed to party insiders.
This is the election cycle when everything is up. You've got the U.S. Senate race, you've got the governor's race, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, but you also have 110 seats over in the House and everything over in the state Senate. And I know that the House particularly is a place where Democrats see opportunities because you have, again, in the recent past, been in control in the House, and some of those seats are a little more flexible than perhaps some of the Senate seats. How much emphasis do you put on state House as you move into the cycle?
Well, at the party, we're going to put emphasis on every single race. Obviously, the big prize is the governor's office and making sure that we reelect Debbie Stabenow, those two big statewide races. But then you also have Attorney General, Secretary of State, and State House and State Senate, as you said. What we're going to do at the party is really organize. We want to make sure that the work we do benefits the entire ticket. But I can tell you, if you look at what happened in Virginia, if you look at what happened in other states, seats that people thought were unattainable for Democrats became attainable because people got out and did the work, and there is a real dissatisfaction out there that can't be denied with the direction that Donald Trump has taken the country, and people, increasingly independents and moderate Republicans have really kind of recoiled from that. So look, I think everything is up for grabs this year. I wouldn't have said that a year ago, but the way the winds are blowing, the way we've been able to recruit good candidates, and the examples we've seen from 2017, I think people shouldn't be shocked if we make significant gains, not only in the State House, but the State Senate. And one race in particular that's going to be very important is the one right here in Kent County, the 29th State Senate District race with Winnie Brinks, but also Kalamazoo, Battle Creek. There's going to be three very competitive State Senate races in this media market.
And not lost on you, but something we should mention to the folks watching is that these elections do have consequences beyond just governance because there's a census coming up in 2020. The senators who are elected in this cycle will still be in office and will be part, well, depending on what happens on the ballot initiative, but if things stay as they are, they'll be part of the group that will be drawing those lines for U.S. House, State House, and State Senate, and that's a very important thing as elections go forward.
Yeah, we've got to maximize our opportunities, as you said, going into the census year. Republicans were benefited greatly from having a big wave victory in 2010. We got to make sure that we get everything out of this election that we possibly can so that we can make sure that the lines are drawn fairly and that the kind of aggressive gerrymandering that was done in the last decade doesn't happen again next time.
That's the view from the Democratic side. We'll hear from the Republicans next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Decision 2018 is on the minds of the party chairman here in the state of Michigan. Up next, Republican Chairman Ron Weiser. Mr. Chairman, let's look at the landscape politically. A year and a month ago, Republicans were celebrating in a pretty big way because of the victory of Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and a Republican wave in some cases. And then came all of the pushback. There were protests. And we've seen a year of relative unrest going into the 2018 election cycle. What do Republicans have to do to reclaim the enthusiasm they had in the fall of 2016?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things is that when I became chair last time in 2009, the Michigan Republican Party was in disarray, and we had to rebuild it from scratch. We had hardly anybody here. We had to find all the people, put it back together, and face an administration that had been in power for 6.5 years. And now in 2018, as we hit this election and this cycle, starting a year ago in 2017, we have one of the strongest Michigan parties, state parties in the whole country here in Michigan. So we have the resources, I think, to do what I believe will be important for this election. We have the curse right now of the second year of a new presidency, where the president's power, the president's party is quite often isn't treated well at the polls. And then you also have the fact that here in Michigan for the last 3 decades, the governorships have been turning over every 8 years. So, save Engler was 12, but there's been a back and forth since the late 1980s. So with those things against us, what we looked at here is what we could do to make sure that we were able to have an opportunity to keep this state red again. And as you know, I'm a regent, so I'm used to saying go blue, but we want to keep it red here, not blue.
When
So-
you look at this election cycle, I mean, there are a number of challenges. You outlined a couple of them, but there are even bigger challenges, and that's just the volume of races, because it's everything.
Yes.
From that U.S. Senate race, the governor's race, all the constitutional offices, 110 House seats, the state Senate, and every U.S. congressional seat is up. How do you prioritize when you go into that? Because clearly, controlling the House and Senate, at least for now, at the state level is important when it comes to redistricting. We'll see what happens with ballot initiatives and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we should talk about that too.
But those are important. All of those races are important, and that's a lot to cover all at once.
It is. We had the same thing though in 2010, and as you know, we won everything. We went from 22 seats down to 16 seats up in the House, took a supermajority in the Senate, and won all those constitutional offices, including all the Ed Board offices, which are important too. Me as an Ed Board member as well as my wife, so we think those are important. Yes, it is a challenge because of the number of offices that we have and because of those things I talked about a minute ago about the winds blowing against us. So we here at the state party believe that the way you overcome that is what happens when you have a quarterback you can't pass. Then you got to be good at blocking and tackling. And if we have the wind against us, then we have to be the best in the country in blocking and tackling, and that's what we're focusing on.
The elections are increasingly about things other than just winning a race. Obviously, there are policies that will be impacted by that. I already talked about redistricting a little bit, and you suggested we talk about it. So let's do, because there is a ballot initiative that some folks are attempting to get to a vote in this cycle that would change the way that districts are drawn here in the state of Michigan. And there is a populist idea behind that that has been used in some other states where they have done it. What's your take on that particular ballot initiative, since you expressed some interest?
Well, you know, it's not a populist movement. It's a Democrat movement. It's all Democrats and their operatives that are behind this. They can't win at the ballot box, so they've decided that they have to try to do it in a different way. And this is really an initiative that's about gerrymandering, which we all know exists. But that being said, this is gerrymandering the Constitution. It affects so many provisions of the Constitution, it's almost ridiculous. And it takes away a lot of the rights of citizens. If citizens don't like the way districts were done, they have no right to challenge those in court under this provision. So you've taken the courts out of it, which I don't think is appropriate. And it creates supposedly an independent body who's picked by the Secretary of State more than anybody. And how do you know whether it's really bipartisan, which is what they claim it'll be? It's supposedly a third Republicans, a third Democrats, and a third independents. Well, in this state, we don't have registrations, so anybody can say they're a Republican, anybody can say they're a Democrat, and anybody can say they're an independent. And it's going to be somebody who's going to make the choice of who those people are. And once they get that power, none of them can have any experience at all in politics or what the rules are that are. I mean, there's a Voting Rights Act that's supposed to be applied. I mean, they won't have any knowledge of that or any background at all, and they're paid. They're paid $44,000 a year for a part-time job, and none of our commissions here in Michigan are paid. This will be one of the few which has paid positions. And, you know, it just is an act that violates so many different parts of our current Constitution. It's not the appropriate way to make change.
Is there a way, though, that the redistricting process could be a little less rigged one way or the other? Because whoever's in control of the House and Senate, and Republicans are going to draw it for Republicans and Democrats are going to draw it for Democrats. I mean, say what you like, but that's the way it works.
Look, if the Democrats want to control the process, then they just need to win at the ballot box. It's that simple. And trying to do it this way is not the appropriate way. Changing the Constitution is not the best way to make policy in this state.
Let's talk a little bit about the governor's race, because on both sides there appears to be a pretty spirited primary shaping up. That's not what we had just 4 years ago when Democrats escaped primary. Obviously, Republicans already had their candidate. That changes the paradigm a little bit because A, it's going to cost more money for these candidates to go out and run a primary, but B, you've got Republicans beating up on Republicans, and I know you don't care, but you also have Democrats beating up on Democrats. But that does
we encourage that.
that does create a different dynamic within the party politic, right?
Yes, it does. And what it means is that because of the fact that the candidates who are in primaries come out of them with not much money and only 3 months to to the election, if they want to focus on going out and campaigning, which is what they should be, then the parties take a much bigger role because they're the ones that have to take them across the finish line.
Raising money in today's environment must be interesting because these races have become increasingly more expensive. Folks like you at the party level are tasked with finding people who are willing to be supporters, as are candidates at all levels. And then you've got the head of each of those individual fundraising groups, the congressional group, the senatorial group, the state senate group, the state house group. There's a lot of competition out there for dollars.
There is. Yeah, absolutely.
How difficult is it?
Plus organizations that are outside of the state. I mean, you have the national organizations coming here and raising money in this state also.
So how tough does that make it when you get ready for a race where everything's on the line? I mean, I know people think of presidential races as the big year, but in Michigan, this is it. I mean, this is the really the big race.
Well, you know, at least on the Republican side, I can tell you that people have a great concern about returning to the lost decade of the last decade, which was really a disaster for Michigan. And so for that reason, when I talk with them about, hey, this is about Michigan, this is not about national politics, this is about the future of this state, people have opened up their pocketbooks in a way that I've been really pleased with. So they care about the future of this state. I mean, they don't want to return to that sticker on the back of the cars that say, well, the last person that leaves Michigan, please turn off the lights. I mean, that's not a place anybody wants to go again.
You talk about it being about Michigan, and I think there are a lot of people that would say, yeah, this is about Michigan, but you can't separate it from the national politics, can you, given the kind of attention that this president, the Republican president, has gotten in the past year, given the rather larger-than-life presence that he has?
Well, you know, other than the U.S. Senate race and the state House races, none of what goes on here affects what happens in Washington. And what Washington does affect us. But, you know, the future of the state is still the future of the state. And as we've seen in the last 8 years, as the Snyder administration has turned the state around, balanced its budgets, created a rainy day fund, prevented any government shutdowns, turned the economy from one of the worst in the country to one of the best. I mean, I remember the governor just gave us something at his Christmas party. He talked about the fact that this state, of all the states in the Midwest, has the highest retention of young people when they come out of college of any of the other states in the Midwest. And that's, you know, those are important things to us. We want to have a place for our kids to stay and work here. We don't want them going off to other states. I mean, we care about our families and our grandchildren, me having them. I don't want my kids moving someplace else.
I ask you this next question because I'm interested. The two parties here in the state of Michigan have a different approach to how they come up with chairmen of the party. In your case, as you said, when you took over before, so you've done this before.
Yes.
You've got quite a bit on your plate. There are a lot of other things that you're involved in. And I know when Ronna Romney McDaniel left from this position to go to the national party, people were saying, well, what are we going to do? Why does a guy like you, who's already done this once before, who's got a full docket of stuff out there to do without this, why do you jump back in with both feet?
Duty. I care about the future of the state. I care about the people in the state. I care about my kids and my grandchildren, and they all live here, and I want them to stay. I want them to have a future. And so it's really all about that. I mean, I care. There's other things I could have done, as you know. I had invitations to go to Washington and do things again there, but this is more important to me.
This is a really important election. How do you gauge this on the scale of the elections you've been involved in?
Well, the other ones I've been involved with, at least in the state level, were the 2009-10, which was obviously hugely important because we had a state that was going down the toilet, and now we've saved it. Now keeping it going in the same direction and continuing the legacy of this administration is, I think, really important. And I don't think any of us want to have us go back to where we were.
Of course, a lot can happen between now and Election Day. Republicans already have seen at least one of their major candidates for U.S. Senate decide not to run. We'll continue to follow all of the developments between now and November. And we're back with more To the Point. We're all out of time. We'll see you next week. To the Point.